Hello, my name is Maureen Spelman, and I am a professor at North Central College, which is located in Naperville, Illinois. And I'm going to share with you my research study that was assessing a postgraduate character education intervention. Educational leadership programs in the United States, as you may know, bear the burden of preparing candidates from the very beginning of their leadership studies all the way to licensure. So the primary focus is typically on the study of rules and codes, little or no emphasis on virtue ethics. At my current institution, our program mission and vision are based on the belief that character is a defining element that is important for effective and authentic leadership. Recognition of that moral purpose actually resulted in our faculty receiving a generous grant to support the redesign of our educational leadership program. We know that ethical leadership is really widely regarded as being central to the task of nurturing schools to become moral institutions so that they can promote the growth and character development of students. In fact, a number of thought leaders agree that cultivating a culture of character is one of the key responsibilities of school leaders. However, it would seem that leaders need to first focus on a change of self in order to effectively lead their schools in changing the culture. And while character development is a lifelong journey, educational leadership programs can lay the foundation by facilitating the deepening of individual character of leader candidates and enabling them to go forward and support a culture of character in their future leadership roles. Developing the capacity of future leaders, then, with developmental intentionality can be a significant factor in the subsequent success of school-wide character education programs. So institutions like ours that prepare future administrators may want to consider focusing not only on the specialized knowledge and management skills, but also on the development of leader character. This type of holistic approach would be designed not just to prepare effective leaders, but to prepare effective and ethical leaders. As you may agree, recent global and national events have brought the issue of ethical leadership into the spotlight and have sparked a renewed interest in virtue ethics and character development. So traditionally, though, the focus has been on character education for just pre-K to 12 students. However, in recent years, institutions of higher education are increasingly joining the conversation. Institutions of higher education have a history of preparing leaders, but in this 21st century, it's become critically apparent that leaders need to be prepared to lead in a way that is virtuous and oriented towards a global common good. So for this study, based on an extensive literature review, we revised the educational leadership program at our institution and grounded it in three specific components: program-specific leadership virtues, the development of leader character, and cultivating practical wisdom. Our program consists of 7 discrete courses combined with a year-long internship. The curriculum redesign team created a distinct set of programmatic learning outcomes as well as granular sub-outcomes, and that was how we then began to map those through the existing set of our program courses. We mapped out specifically where each sub-outcome would be introduced, developed, applied, and assessed. The very first course in our program is entitled Mission-Driven Leadership, and this course lays the foundation for the Cultures of Character framework that you see displayed here on our screen. The assigned readings and weekly presentations all have been specifically chosen to support candidates' knowledge and understanding of the leadership virtues that you see here, the development of leader character, of course, all under the umbrella of practical wisdom. But this illustration here is actually our framework that guided the redesign process. This particular research study utilized a convenient sampling of about 12 participants, and the analysis process used a mixed methods approach that involved gathering of both quantitative and qualitative data. First of all, the scholarship application narratives were scored using rubrics aligned with the 3 programmatic sub-outcomes that are embedded in the first course. These numerical scores provided quantitative data, as each data source was scored using a parallel rubric. We used a scale of 0 to 3. Next, written reflections that were completed during the course and recordings of oral interviews that took place at the end of the course were scored using parallel rubrics. We also collected additional qualitative data as we looked at the reflections and oral interviews and mined them for thematic evidence of candidates' knowledge and understanding of the 3 sub-outcomes. Data also collected from the written reflections and interviews helped us in terms of having a thicker evidence and allowed us to make comparisons across participants and laid a foundation for conclusions as to whether or not we had a positive impact with our character education interventions. In previous academic terms, written reflections had been based on reading chapters from a required textbook. The character education intervention for this study actually replaced that textbook with the journal articles you see displayed here on this screen. They were chosen for their specific focus on elements that would support the development of the three programmatic sub-outcomes. As a pilot intervention study, this study was not intended to present generalizable findings. The conclusions are applicable really only to the unique initial course designed in this program. And the study was undertaken from the inside by one of the research architects who also served as a redesigner and the instructor for program delivery. The aim was to conduct a research study that will have direct applied relevance to professional practice. There were a number of limitations that took place within this situ study. First of all, this study was implemented during the context of numerous institutional COVID-19 protocols. The institutional policies in place aimed at protecting our campus community prevented much faculty collaboration in the design of rubric instruments. In an ideal situation, rubric development would have been a collaborative process involving repeated, iterative cycles of development and testing. Also, the COVID-19 restrictions removed the option of including colleagues as scorers to work together for inter-rater reliability. So these contextual challenges prohibited us from being able to triangulate the data as well, because we could not use field observations or in the classroom role-playing activities. In Illinois, once candidates are admitted through the Phase 1 process, candidates can apply at our institution for a Cultures of Character scholarship. These generous scholarships range from a 20 to 40% tuition discount, and they are made possible by a generous grant from the Kern Family Foundation. The responses to the prompts that you see on the screen provide information for the Scholarship Review Committee, and at the same time provided a baseline writing sample for this research study. Responses to the scholarship application were scored using a rubric that you can see here on the screen. It's aligned on the left with the three programmatic learning sub-outcomes, and the quantitative data was applied using the score above of 0 to 3. As I mentioned earlier, this first course that's redesigned includes assigned readings that are supporting candidates' knowledge and understanding of our programmatic outcomes. The reading reflection assignment expectations for this course are displayed on this slide. Here again, the reading reflections were scored using a rubric that is parallel to the one you saw previously. It's again aligned with the three programmatic learning sub-outcomes, and the numerical quantitative data is also again scored on the same scale of 0 to 3. The written reflections also provided qualitative data as we mined them for thematic evidence, and we looked very closely for evidence of candidates' knowledge and understanding of virtue literacy, leadership character development, references to leadership styles. In Illinois, the Illinois State Board of Education requires a second step as part of the requirement for full admission into educational leadership programs at the graduate level. So in addition to Phase 1, there is the development of a professional portfolio and a timed writing sample. Each candidate must participate in an interview as well with 2 full-time faculty members. And this admission process interview takes place towards the very end of the first academic term and is embedded within the mission-driven leadership course. The questions on this slide are designed to determine each candidate's readiness to move forward in the program. And in the case of this research study, these questions also provided the opportunity to gather additional evidence of candidates' growing understanding of the programmatic sub-outcomes. The Phase 2 interview responses were scored using another parallel rubric, just as we used in the first 2 instances, same alignment with 3 programmatic learning sub-outcomes, and they were also coded for thematic evidence as well. So in terms of some of the results, we did not employ statistical analysis for this pilot exploration. We simply looked at individual and mean scores, and they're going to be displayed on this and several following tables. So for each of the measured sub-outcomes that are associated with this course, the overall mean scores improved over the baseline scores. Here we see sub-outcome 1.1, which is the candidate provides evidence of developing knowledge and understanding related to leadership virtues. As you can see that the baseline score was 0.42, and you can see that it increased to 1.27. While this increase indicates a very sizable increase of 0.85, the individual scores you can see here really varied for students. 10 of the 12 participants saw an increase in their baseline scores. Table 2 is looking at our sub-outcome 2.1. The candidate provides evidence of developing knowledge and understanding related to character development. Here again, you can see the baseline score was 0.58, and as you can see, it increased slightly to 0.83. So the data suggests an increase of only 0.25, but again, as you notice, between the 12 participants, scores varied. 9 of the 12 participants saw an increase from their baseline scores. Table 3 moves on to sub-outcome 4.1. The candidate provides evidence of developing knowledge and understanding related to leadership styles. Here again, we can see that the application response baseline was actually 0. So while we have a nice average increase of 1.06, we can also see that all 12 participants saw an increase from their baseline scores. Table 4 is taking a look at the interviews that were held at the end of the fall 2020 academic term. You can see that we looked at and scored for evidence of all 3 of the sub-outcomes. You can see that there were definitely some strong evidence here that the candidates were actually able to increase their baseline scores as that was compared to all of the other pieces that we've looked at. Table 5 is giving us some information here about the overall scores. So you can see that for all the outcomes in an interview mean scores, the evidence here tells us that it's pretty clear that the selected readings may have supported a positive movement on all the scores in all areas of the 3 outcomes. In a small pilot study such as this one, it's not possible to draw broad conclusions regarding the success of the intervention. But that being said, the main finding is that for each of the targeted sub-outcomes, the mean score has demonstrated a positive movement when compared to the baseline scores. The effect of the intervention appears to have been the strongest in candidates' development of sub-outcome 1.1, knowledge and understanding related to leadership virtues. That being said, though, there were actually increases in the other 2 sub-outcomes as well. When you look at the data through the lens of continuous course and program improvement, it's interesting to examine the mean scores for each of the discrete articles. Reading 1 appeared to have the most impact on the sub-outcome 2.1 focused on character development. Reading 3 had the strongest impact on 1.1, but also reading 3 appeared to have a positive influence on 4.1. Reading 2, interestingly, had a fairly consistent, though somewhat limited, impact on all 3 of the sub-outcomes. So this information will be very valuable as we continue to revise and refine and perhaps select different readings as the course is further refined and developed. In summary, this pilot study was designed to assess the impact of character education interventions at the postgraduate level. The 4 journal articles were selected for their specific focus on relative information that would support the development of the sub-outcomes we talked about. The candidates composed written reflections for each of the 4 discrete articles, and they also participated in the oral interviews at the very end of the 15-week academic term. The written reflections, the interviews, as well as the baseline application narratives were all assessed using parallel rubrics, which was a pilot exploration in this new methodology of using rubrics as an instrument. This particular approach in assessing knowledge and understanding does appear to have value. Reflective writings and conversations can provide insights, of course, to the understanding and the knowledge that may not be dictated in a more typical survey or questionnaire type of instrument. The rubrics also provided the advantage of helping the researcher to examine both quantitative and qualitative data. So in this instance, the use of rubrics in a mixed method research program does appear to show some promise. The limited nature and the timing of the study prevented the triangulation of the data through observations. It would add to the full picture of the impact of the intervention if circumstances had allowed for observations in role-playing in the classroom or in field experience applications. In terms of those who might be considering a similar exploration, I would recommend the use of teams to develop and test the research rubrics. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the rubric development process should be iterative to allow for refinement and revisions. The coding of reflective writings and recordings should also be conducted by a group of coders to eliminate bias and to establish inter-rater reliability. These steps would assess designers to assess the impact and increase the efficiency of curricular redesigns that would be ongoing. The limited knowledge generated through this particular study will be analyzed with a view towards continually improving this introductory course, as well as there will be applications for the overall redesign of other courses. The results of the study could potentially reveal insights related to the implementation of leadership programs that are grounded in virtue ethics and may help inform the work of our funding foundation, as well as colleagues at other similarly funded institutions. Ultimately, the data will be used to facilitate ongoing program and course improvement. On the following slides, just list some of the references, and thank you very much for listening.